everyone, and welcome to the next presentation. Next up, we have Guy Leech joining us from UK. But before that, we'll just take a little bit of time while we wait and make sure everybody is in and go over some trivia questions. Let's win some fun little prizes at the end. And the first question is, what is Gary Brackett's 6 E's of leadership? No, I'm just kidding. We'll make it a little easier. What non-sport competition began in Louisville in 1925? So we got a couple coming in. Kind of like we have a delay in group chat. Fine. All right, let's see what it is. And the answer is, oh, National Spelling Bee. I think we'll accept Bourbon Fest. All right, next we're going to have is, in which U.S. city was the first gas station created? I may have forgot to mention, but at the bottom, do the chat for the answers and not Q&A, please. Give a few seconds for that. Columbus, Ohio. Who we got for the winner? And please, for anybody that we shout out that's correct, make sure you're emailing Jennifer your name. See if we got any new ones. Okay, maybe I need to give a little bit more time. Remember, you can use Google to find out the answers for them. So we'll go to the last one. What was the first state to have electric street lamps? All right. Now we're getting there. All right. Answer is Indiana. Wow. Go us. And it's popping all around. Well, during the presentation, I'll go through that to see who actually won. This group chat was going way too fast for me. But we'll move on to the fun stuff that you actually want to check out. I know he's one of my the people that I really enjoy watching. Got to watch a master class from him not too long ago on PowerShell. And so please give a warm welcome to Guy Leech. He's from the UK. He is a EUC consultant and CTP, and he'll be sharing us about some PowerShell commands for troubleshooting. Guy?
Thank you. Can you hear me? Can anyone hear me? Please confirm you can hear me, because I don't want to talk to myself for 45 minutes. Somebody put in the chat they can hear me. Right, well, Dwayne can hear me. Yay, that's great, yes. Well, I don't know, you decide at the end whether that's great or not. Okay, so let's just do a quick introduction to who I am, but thank you for the intro. Just to sort of give my credentials more than anything else. So I've been working in this Citrix space for 25 years now. A lot of people say I don't look old enough. I like those sort of people. And I've been troubleshooting those sorts of problems, the sorts of problems that you troubleshoot and that users report, pretty much daily since then. So what I want to show you today really is how we use, or how I use PowerShell to aid me in that troubleshooting. So first of all, let's talk about why I use PowerShell, or why you should use PowerShell, because it isn't just about me. It's hoping that this will rub off on you folks as well. Well, first of all, unlike with something like VBS that we've probably used to log on scripts, those of us are old enough to predate PowerShell. We can actually run it interactively, so we can run it in two ways. We can write scripts, but you might say, well, I'm not really a scripter. But then you can just use it interactively like you would a command prompt, although please don't call it a DOS prompt. It hasn't been a DOS prompt for 20 plus years. And as you'll see throughout my sort of presentation, I'll be using Control-R to search a persistent history. I've got probably tens of thousands of commands in my history across various machines. So as long as you've got a persistent profile, you've typed it before, you can find it again, save having to type. But we'll find out that PowerShell is a great language for lazy people like me, so we can tab complete lots of things anyway, and not really have to know very much. All right, sorry, just getting used to this slide mechanism. So there's plenty of scripts out there already. I've got probably approaching about 100 now on GitHub in sort of Citrix, EUC, Microsoft, VMware, Ivanti space. So again, take scripts. If somebody's already written something, why write one from scratch? Just take it, but make sure you understand what it does, and it's not accidentally or deliberately going to wreak havoc across your 10,000 user domain and put you offline. As we'll see, tab completion is very easy to do. And there's just thousands and thousands of commandlets, even just built in with Microsoft, even before you start getting into adding extras for Citrix virtual apps and desktops, or VMware vSphere, and of course using them together as well, so that we can bring all data together from Active Directory, VMs, users, etc., and bring them into one place. And once you get used to it, it's easy to repeat. So once you get the idea of looping or selecting things, formatting things, you've done it for one type of object, a process, you can do it for a service or anything else. It's very easy. So it tends to be quite a steep learning curve to start with, but once you get to that, over that learning curve, it's all downhill. It's all pretty easy stuff once you get there. And what I'd say is persevere. Sit in a PowerShell prompt rather than a command prompt, and force yourself to do it. It's well worth it. We use a lot of aliases, again, because it's quicker. If you go into a PowerShell prompt and type dir, guess what? You'll get a directory listing like you would in CMD. But dir doesn't literally exist within PowerShell. It's just an alias for getChildItem, which you probably wouldn't have known that it was getChildItem if you are new to PowerShell. And very many other aliases are easy to remember: ls for listing files, ps for process listing, and so on. But don't use those in scripts, because it just makes the scripts harder to read, harder to understand, because we want to make these so that people can understand them, so they know they're not accidentally or deliberately malicious, and also to help people then script. The way I got into programming back in 1980, yes, I know, the last millennium, was by looking at existing programs, albeit not in PowerShell then, in Commodore Basic, understanding how they worked and modifying them. So the more you make your programs readable, the better it is to help other people, and also, as you get old like me, to help yourself, so that you can actually remember why you did something, make it nice and readable. And then there's lots of formats. I've been helping people do some JSON stuff recently, but CSV is a very easy format to get data into for poor man's reporting if you want to get some reports out of a product. But you don't want to buy the reporting option, or isn't a reporting option for a lot of these things. So a lot of Citrix stuff from CVAD, I'll get out into CSVs, maybe set up a scheduled task to email a list of apps or usage or problem machines on a daily, weekly, monthly basis, however frequently people want it. Good to see that the animations don't work in this fancy presentation system as well as when I use PowerPoint. I can do PowerShell, I can't do PowerPoint. So here's my top 10, or 0XA as we say in hex. I can still do hex conversions in my head, which doesn't really mark me down as a normal human being. These are in no particular order, and these are the 10 I probably use most. In my troubleshooting of applications not working, things crashing, slow logons, all those sort of side of things. So I'm just going to give a very brief intro to these. I almost certainly won't get to number 10, but I will make the slide deck available afterwards. Because there's quite good resources in there, links to scripts and other information. So hopefully it's sort of a self-contained training resource. And in here as well, I've got some of those aliases, and you can see why I've said don't put aliases in scripts. So if you looked at a script and saw it pipe into EPCSV, it's like, oh, okay, what's that? Yeah, not obvious. But as we'll see, I don't tend to use some of the bigger ones on the command line anyway, because I can just tab complete. So we will have some screen sharing and me showing of these stuff as well. It's not just going to be PowerPoint wall to wall. Okay, if click in the right place, that would help, wouldn't it? So WMI or CIM, underlying mechanism for querying all sorts of information, whether it be simple stuff like processes, services, drivers, or more in-depth things like Kerberos sessions and lists of printers and all that sort of stuff. It's all available through WMI and through a standard query interface. So you just query something. And we can even tab complete stuff. So let's actually start doing a screen share if this is going to work for me. Click the screen share button. And let's go. So slight homage to Commodore when you get to see it, where I started all those years ago. Now if I find the right window, let's go for that one. Anybody can confirm in the chat. Oh, yeah, something's popped up suggesting that my screen is visible. So if I want to do something like, let's have a look. One I use a lot is, when was this last machine last booted? So this is just running in actually Windows Terminal on my laptop. And so I just tab completed that. And what's my next argument? Again, I'm going to tab complete that. Don't even need a name for it. And what's the class? Well, I know, but I could look it up, or I could even tab through them if I wanted to. So we give that enough time. That should tab complete as well. Come on, you can do it. Yes, you can. Come on, please. Oh, yes, I could have typed it in half the time I'm waiting for it to tab complete, but that wouldn't have been a great demo, would it? Don't you love live demos? Never record. Oh, there we go. Finally, it comes back. So I need more than 6 vCPUs in this laptop. So if I just do that, that's a WMI or CIM instance for the operating system. By default, it returns a few things, not particularly interesting. But we can present a whole load of information. Lots of things there. It could be useful. There's a script referenced in the deck that I use when I'm doing health checks or explorations on customer site, and that I query about 50 of these classes to get information in CSVs across a number of different computers, so I can then compare and contrast. My favorite one to get this way is something called last boot time. Notice I can even tab complete that. Or if I wasn't sure it's called boot, something to do with boot, I could just say star boot star. Yeah. Or because I'm a terrible sense of humor, I just tend to go last boo. When did the computer last boo? Yeah, so there we see the last boot time. We can get all that sort of information out very easily. So I use that a lot in troubleshooting. When did this service start? For instance, when did my spooler process start? So again, I'm going to jump ahead, but mainly because it's easier than having to stop and start screen sharing. So in fact, let's switch to a administrator PowerShell, because being the sensible kind of person I am, I don't log on as an admin to my laptop, and none of you out there log on as admins to your laptop, do you, and run web browsers with this huge attack surface? No, guy. So what we're going to do is we're going to have a look at the spooler process. In fact, just watch this. I don't even need to know what it's called. It's spool something. I didn't even need to type an argument name in. I just tab completed, yeah? If I want to see other arguments, I'm just going to put a minus in, which is what we use to represent arguments, and then space. And hey, look, I get a list of everything, and I can even cursor through it. And if you look at the bottom left, you can see it tells me what type it is. If it's a string or a string array, which means it can take a list of arguments, so I could get a list of specific processes or all processes from a number of different machines if I wanted to, all in one go. So you can already hopefully start to feel the power of this. Obviously, if I was doing this face-to-face, I'd start with a show of hands of who's already using this PowerShell for troubleshooting and so on, because the idea is really it's so easy to use. Anyway, so we'll look for the spooler, but when did that start? Because if I do that, well, that tells me some interesting things: working sets, process memories, session IDs, process IDs, but that doesn't tell me when it started. Well, guess what? Again, when I first explore something, pipe it through select star, and it will tell you everything there is to know, which is a lot of fascinating stuff. But then when you know what you want, you can just say select start, and guess, look, I'm tab completing it again, so I can see my spooler started. When did we boot again? Can't remember. Okay, so I've just hit Control R. I'm going to search for last boot, and there's my last command. Notice I'm using an alias, so GCIM is the alias for get-cim instance that I was using previously. So we can see the spooler started, pretty much after boot. Boot was at 129, and spooler started 130. We can actually work out the exact number of seconds afterwards and things like that, but I haven't got the time to show those sorts of things, but they're very easy to do in PowerShell. So we can take the output from one commandlet and use it in arithmetic and other things like that. Okay, let's just stop that screen share, go back to the slides. If you do get forced to use version 2, the latest version of Windows PowerShell is 5.1. The latest version of PowerShell is version 7. PowerShell 5 in Windows isn't going to be updated at all. Everything is now PowerShell 7. But unfortunately, I have to work with a lot of customers where I'm lucky to have anything more than PowerShell 2. So in PowerShell 2, do similar sorts of things. The same sort of WMI objects are there, but we use get WMI object or GWMI instead. But if you get the chance, upgrade. Not the OS necessarily. You can have even higher versions of PowerShell and XP if you're on XP or 2008 R2 still, which, a lot of my customers are, not through my recommendation, of course. Some have methods. So again, something we do a lot of in the C world is look at user profiles, local user profiles, look at sizes, last logon times. Is that an old profile? Can I delete it? And then with this method, you don't have to bother looking at the registry and file system directly. You can just say, hey, give me a list of all profiles, using what we just saw with get CIM instance, but we win 32 user profile. And then they have methods on them such as delete. And again, that just deletes the whole thing, so you don't have to do it with through the file system, and it'll also delete the entries in the registry. Again, we can query all this stuff. There's also a get CIM class, which will show you classes. Citrix have a lot as well, which can tell you a lot of information within a remote session. This is true of all PowerShell. If there's a filter option in a commandlet, use it rather than filtering afterwards. Might be the difference between getting 10 objects back compared with 10,000. Guess what? Getting 10 objects back is generally a hell of a lot quicker and uses less memory. As I said earlier, we can use this to actually get information from a number of machines. So I use it for my health check. So I can say, okay, get me all the local file system volumes across these 10 machines that I'm health checking. And then I can put them into a CSV and then open it up and have a look. Oh, look, I've sorted on free space. This one's about to run out of space. If people don't have their own monitoring tools. Or you can make your own monitoring tools through PowerShell and schedule tasks, of course. There are other namespaces if you have the misfortune to be forced to work with SCCM. It's got its own namespace to be able to automate a lot of stuff there. And I said earlier, I use a lot of the Citrix classes. So I'll just breeze through this, given I've already given a demonstration of it. There's an example of me filtering. So the caption is what you see in services control panel applets. So we can say, show me all the services that start with VMware. So that's rather than getting all the services back, which there's probably several hundred, and then filtering out the VMware ones. And you can filter on any of the properties that you get back. As we saw already, we can tab complete, so you don't need to know much. We can query what classes there are. Or it's like, oh, I wonder if I can query the battery. Let me just go and do a get CIM class, and then it will pattern match for you as well. So you don't need to know, is it Win32, some is CIM underscore. Yeah, just use pattern matching. And here's a just very quick example of using these different namespaces. But again, we can explore them either with that get CIM class, because you're giving them namespace. Once you put the root / you can actually then tab complete. So it'll tell you whether you've got any other third-party namespaces on that particular machine where you're running the command. And these don't need to be run privileged either to get a lot of the information. And we can remote, which is great for doing something once but getting information from many machines. Or you could put the computers into a text file and write get content text file, instead of where I've got Puta 1 and Puta 2. Very easy in PowerShell to start stringing commands together. And grid views we'll come to in a bit, or CSVs, which I already mentioned in terms of getting data out. It's a very good way of being able to visualize information very quickly, particularly the grid view, so you don't have to have Excel installed on any machine, or don't have to copy it back to your local desktop to be able to sort, filter, etc. Few useful classes. Again, I'm just going to breeze through these due to lack of time, but they'll be in the slide deck available afterwards. Some of the ones that I use, and where there might be equivalent built in, what we call commandlets in PowerShell. Sometimes the CIM, WMI classes give us more information. So again, in there's an example of the sorts of things we can get, which we can't get through standard PowerShell commandlets. Although don't use this Win32 product one, otherwise you'll see a lot of this package has been modified in your event logs, and that's advice from Microsoft themselves. And that's the link to the script that I referred to earlier. Event logs, yeah, there's a lot of very interesting and useful stuff in event logs, but can you really be bothered to go in and look at it? In the old days, when I was only vaguely old, we only had a couple of event logs. We had application and system, so it's relatively easy for a log on just to have a look for those 2 minutes when they were logging on, having a look for errors, warnings, or just general useful information. But now we've got 300 plus event logs on the more modern operating systems, sometimes even more. How the heck am I going to look through all of those? I'm not going to do it manually. I'm going to use get win event. Won't show you this again because of the problems with the screen sharing, but on my laptop last time I ran this, there were 388 different event logs. If I wanted to see, well, why was my log on slow? There might be some stuff in other event logs, not just application or system or third-party ones. So I want to be able to search across all of them. And the providers as well. So remember, that's what you call a source in the event viewer, or a provider. But we can do that in Outgrid view very easily to look at those events. Let me see if I've got one that I can just get running while I get on to the next slide. No, okay, that's well prepared, guy. Well done, top marks. Did I say that out loud? Oh dear. But then we find we can put them into a grid view. So, in fact, let's just do a very simple screen I want the screen share here, if that's going to work again. So it's just a bit cumbersome, although it seems to be quite a good tool for presenting. The screen sharing is a little bit cumbersome. That's why I'm not switching between the slides and the and demos as much as I normally would do when I'm just using Zoom or GoToMeeting or, no, I was going to say WebEx, but I wouldn't use WebEx. Right, so there we go. So if I just do a get dash win event, so it actually defaults to needing me to run it as an administrator. Actually tell me that, which is nice of it. I am running as an administrator. Quick way to tell if you're running as an administrator. Filter driver. Okay, so let's do we can do a list log. So if you think, it's something to do with terminal services, but I'm not quite sure what. Serve. No, terminal services. They are, aren't they? Yes. So there you can see all the ones with terminal services. So you can see I've got some in an event log there. So I could just say, get dash win event minus log name, put some quotes around it. Yeah, and that's really interesting, isn't it? Except what we can then do is pipe it through this outgrid view I've mentioned several times, which is a bit more information. But as you'll find with PowerShell, we quite often have a limited amount of information that's shown by default. So what we tend to do then is just put in a select star to show everything, and then we can start to drop the stuff we don't want. So you can see here I've got this grid view. So we can see log-offs in here, and we can see all these columns, but it's like, okay, well, provider ID, that's a GUID, that doesn't look very interesting. I'm going to get rid of that provider ID. I don't want to show that. And the beauty of this grid view is what's built into PowerShell, so I've not had to write anything. Keywords also looks a bit, not very useful. So I'll get rid of that. But perhaps if I only want to see session log-offs, for instance, so that's ID 3. What am I going to do? Well, I'm going to go into my grid view. I'm going to say ID, add. Knows it's numerical, and notice there, but I'm going to say equals 23. I'm going to type 23. Yes, there we go. So you can see it's now filtered all my events from that one event log. And we can see those are at different times. Yeah, I can actually drag the columns around as well as be able to remove them. So there we go. There's the time created. So I can see those are at different times. I can sort on, it's already sorted on time created, but I can sort on any of the other numeric or alphanumeric columns. And this comes into its own when we query across multiple event logs. So what we'll find out is that there's a link to a script later that I use a lot. I know a lot of other people out there do. It's on my GitHub repository. We can say, okay, well, during the logon, search 300 plus event logs, either for every event or just errors, warnings, critical, etc., and just show me what's interesting. And then you can go and pick stuff out, and that's been incredibly useful for certainly logon analysis, quite often useful for boot analysis as well. Right, stop sharing, go back to the deck. So I'm halfway through now. And what I could have done with those events as well is export them to CSV. So that's the beauty of when I've brought events from 300 plus event logs together, I can actually then save them to a CSV, and I can then look at that CSV later, rather than having to save each of the EVTX files individually and then iterate through them manually. So Windows events, I can't stress how much useful information there is in there, either for troubleshooting or spotting problems, making your own sort of monitoring, alerting systems. I've done that for customers. Oh, spooler's stopped. Right, let me do something. Restart the spooler or email somebody or restart the Citrix print service as well. There's a lot of things you can do. And of course, we don't need to log on, so I don't need to MSTSC to anything. I can get it from one or more machines. Again, in a single command if I needed to. So I can look at everything in one big chunk from across multiple machines. compare and contrast. That's the usual game I play as a consultant. Spot the difference. This user works, this one doesn't. Let's have a look for what's different in the event log, for instance. Might be something useful in there. So we'll go through these very quickly, given I've just given a quick demo. It's really, again, slide deck's more for reference for you guys afterwards if you're not familiar with this stuff. There's me using aliases. A question mark is short for where. % is short for each object, so I'm actually iterating through them all. So this is the precursor to a script called Event Aggregator on GitHub, which basically says, show me all the event logs, and then for each event log which has got more than 0 records in this record count field, then go and get everything between 1629 and 1631 today. If it was yesterday, you then put the date in, 1709 or 0917, depending on which date format you want to use, and then bring them all back together. So you can see we're selecting everything and then sorting them on the time created. So they're in time order rather than event log order. I've built a script wrapped around that, which is very useful for troubleshooting. But again, because there's so many records you can get, you filter left where possible. So here we've got the hash table, or a dictionary you might know it as, where we can specify exactly what we want. So we can filter on specific logs or times or event IDs, users. There's a lot of things we can filter on if we want to. And again, link to the bottom for that script, which I find incredibly useful and I use most days, even weekends. Yes. Okay, so remoting. Yeah. Problem probably isn't going to happen on my laptop, but it's going to happen on a user machine somewhere. So how do I get onto that computer? Well, I can do stuff through automation on that computer easy enough, but this presentation isn't really so much about automation as about troubleshooting. So as long as I set up remoting, which again is secure. Admins by default are the only ones allowed to remote, although you can allow users to, non-admin users to remote as well if they need to for other reasons. And in PowerShell, we have this concept of a PowerShell session, which can be interactive. So let me show you that. If I start sharing again. So the idea being it's a bit like a telnet or an SSH that you could do through PuTTY, we used to in the old days to Unix or Linux boxes, or still can do to VMware and vCenters and machines like that. So I'm on this machine called GLS 19MCS01, which happens to be a normal user session, although I've elevated. So I've done a run as admin and put some admin credentials in. So what I'm going to do is actually go to, what should I pick? Domain controller in my lab. So now the prompt kind of suggests I'm on that machine. So if I do the same command again, and oh look, I've still got my command history. So my command history is coming from my local machine. So I've just up arrowed. Then I'm on that machine. But what I can do is actually then do things on this machine. So let's say user complains that their session's hung, but they're in the middle of a really important document that they need to finish. You look at your Citrix directory or whatever it is, find out what machine they're on, and then you try and get a session, you try and MSTSC to it, but you find that hangs as well because there's very little resource. This is a much lower impact way of getting onto there. So I could actually say, let's have a look. Let's do a get dash process, sort CPU, descending, and we're just going to look at the top 10 offenders. Oh, look, SQL Server on my domain controller. Interesting. I don't know why SQL Server is on my domain controller, because I have SQL servers in my lab. I've got an old Dell rack mount with 80 plus VMs on it, 30 plus running at any one time. So I don't quite understand why SQL Server will have used more CPU. 192,000 seconds, whatever that is. 192,123 seconds divided by an hour. That's had nearly, over 2 days solid of CPU. So, what's going on there? But obviously, I'm not troubleshooting a real issue here. I'm just showing you how I can remote onto a machine. What I can't do, though, is run anything interactive. as in something with a GUI. If I run Notepad, Notepad does run, but because this is a character-based session, there's nowhere for it to display that UI. So that'll just sit there until I hit Control-C. That's a very useful way of getting in, looking. I can see what users are logged on. I can look at processes. I can look at, I can see how much free space I've got. If I type the right command, I might have run out of disk space, as I had on one of my VMs the other day. So, 0 size remaining, but that's on a CD-ROM, so we're okay there. So a lot of easy stuff to remote troubleshoot. And then when I get more advanced, I can start to automate that with creating a PS session, new PS session, and then invoking commands in a session. I tend to use this for interactive troubleshooting, where for whatever reasons, I can't MSTSC or perhaps it's logon that's hanging. So if you MSTSC, you'll have the same problem of a hung logon. That's a whirlwind tour into remoting interactively. Testing network. How are we going to test networking? We're going to ping, aren't we? No, we're not. Ping just means ICMP is alive if someone's enabled it through the firewall. It's not a great test. It doesn't tell me if port 80 or port 443 on my web server is alive. So in the old days, the admin would install the Telnet client on his Windows machine, or use something third-party like PuTTY to be able to test the network ports open. Now we have testnet connection, and that allows us, to test a specific port on a specific machine. We can also do a trace route as well. I'm not actually going to demo this one for sake of time, because I've only got just over 10 minutes left. But what it allows us to do, I should have an example command in here. There we go. So if I want to test that port 443 is alive on something, then I can test name or IP address. Obviously, if we test the name, it helps us check that name resolution is also still working, and checks that it can actually get a response from that port. So I was helping someone the other day write a script that's going to run, I'm not sure how often, but via a scheduled task to check a range of Citrix machines on ports like good old 1494, the display port. And if there's a problem, it'll actually send an email message. So again, SMTP email sending is built into PowerShell with send-mail message. So we can put our own alerting in there if something's awry. And if you want something to check your environment, again on my GitHub repository in the Citrix repo, there's a script you can set up a scheduled task to run however many times you want a day, and it'll tell you how many machines you've got available, how many sessions, how many in maintenance mode, just general health of your environment. And because it's returning an object, it's very easy in a script to say, oh, if I can't connect to it, then do this. Whereas in the old days, when we used to have to do a ping because we hadn't got anything else, and then parse the text output, that was a pain. And if you're doing it on a command line, you can use TNC. Again, say, sorry, for the sake of time, I'm not going to do the demonstration of that one. Now, it's just slightly different in all the other, in my personal top 10, because this does need an extra module, not quite a third-party module, it's a Microsoft module, but it does need the Active Directory module, which you get installed by default when you install the AD tools from RSAT, but you can actually install the Active Directory module on its own as well, either on Win 10 or on server OSs. I tend to do that on all my server builds, just so I've got it there for automation scripts if I need it. It's also useful when you're on site and customers don't give you access to things like AD users and computers. So you can run queries to check group membership and things like that. There are other ways of getting an AD, such as through ADSI, LDAP, and even WMI, but they're a little bit more involved, should we say, although again, lots of scripts out there, so you can pick some stuff up. So which has already been made already. That's how we add the PowerShell module. I use this a lot. I was doing it the other day when I was trying to search someone's AD to figure out percentage of users got home directory specified as one particular drive compared with another drive. Because again, guess what? We can filter. So we can get all of the properties, or we can get specific properties. I mean, what properties have we got? Well, we just do get AD username of Bob and properties star to bring all properties back. Now, if you're querying 10,000 users in AD, you wouldn't want to bring all of the properties back, probably. So you want to bring back specific properties, so that can be a list. Why wouldn't I bring them all back? Because of the amount of time it takes to get them all, ship them all, and the amount of memory it's going to take to do that. So work with the properties that you know best. And there we go there. So here's a query I can use to say, okay, well, show me all the disabled accounts I have in AD. And I could pipe that through something like export-CSV to give myself a report of all the disabled accounts in AD, just to make sure that they're the ones I'm expecting it to be, and not, oh, look, the CTO or CXO has had his account disabled, although some people might say that the company would function better that way, but not for me to mention. I work for myself, by the way. And this is really where the PowerShell comes into its own. It's for when you're having to do bulk queries or bulk changes. You know, if you need to change the logon script for hundreds or thousands of users, you can do it very easily with the PowerShell module. Just make sure you test it first. You know, in a lab situation, ideally, but certainly to make sure that, you know, the changes are only going to be the changes that you want them to be. You know, take backups so you can restore and so on. So just a few examples in here, and of course, as I say, set AD user to actually then change some properties if you need it. AD group members, one I use a lot. You know, if I'm checking, well, why has this user not got this particular Citrix app? I was told they were in the group. Right, well, let me check it. Oh, look, they're not in the group. Is that a domain controller sync issue? Well, let me give that back to the customer, or let me go and troubleshoot, work out where they've authenticated from, see if that domain controller for some reason isn't syncing. Okay, so let's move on. Get to process. Again, I've shown you this already. We've just done that with the enter PS session. Also did it with the spooler, if you remember. So there's various things we can do, but a lot of troubleshooting is, you know, is this process running? Is it not running? Is it different process properties, loaded modules, DLLs from another one? So in fact, that's the one command I just used in the last screen share to show the top 10 offending processes CPU-wise. Now, that's overall CPU consumption. So Task Manager will show you that CPU consumption figure, but also instantaneous CPU. But if you want to see, you know, how much CPU has changed in, you know, how being consumed in 10 seconds, then you need to sample it at the start of the 10 seconds and at the end and see what the difference in CPU consumption is. But it's very easy with one line of PowerShell. Again, if you look in the notes, or rather on the intro slide, there should also be a link to my paste bin account. So where it's not a full script, I tend to put one-liners for doing useful things, you know, the sort of stuff I do in my day-to-day travels as a Citrix consultant and admin. I'll put those onto Pastebin. Soon to be coming to my website when my son has finished that for me. So that, again, is one we've already seen, where we see, well, when did the spooler start? Oh, look, it only started 10 minutes ago, so somebody or something must have restarted it. Chrome, of course, doesn't use much CPU, does it? Because we don't have many Chrome processes. Well, this is how we can actually see how much memory it's using across all the Chrome processes or Edge processes, as I tend to use Edge more and more, well, the new Edge more and more now. I've said the M word. There we go, McAfee. So what I'm doing now, I'm using the alias PS, so that's get process. It's actually PS in Linux and Unix. I'm then piping it through, so I'm where the path to the executable. So if it's coming out of C program files McAfee or C program files x86 McAfee, then it will match McAfee. That's a regular expression match, but regular expressions don't need to be scary. Catch one of my sessions on regex for beginners, because regular expressions can be very easy. That regular expression is one that matches McAfee. Yeah, that's not exactly difficult, is it? Not even any stars or asterisks in it. What we're using here is, again, an alias for something called measure object, where we're just measuring the working sets. So again, a column out of task managers, say how much memory have you got not paged out at the moment, allocated or assigned to you. And that actually comes out as a number of bytes. So we just divide it by 1 megabyte. Again, easy enough in PowerShell to do that. So that will show me how much memory all the McAfee process is using. Obviously, we can change McAfee to any other vendor or path you want. What's Fred running? Yeah, I could do it in Task Manager if I wanted to, or Process Explorer. But again, this is all about choices. And certainly if you follow me on Twitter, I posted something the other day where I'd accidentally left Process Explorer running and not paused, and it had used rather a lot of CPU. We're talking tens of hours, whereas obviously this only uses CPU when I actually run the command. And this is nice as well. Yeah, what version? So if Acrobat Reader's crashing on this machine but not on this machine, let me go and actually compare the file versions. So although that's the process, that will then pull out the file version. So, oh, look, that's Acrobat 21.3, but that's Acrobat 21.4. I wonder if that's what's causing the issue. And again, a lot of my life as a consultant is playing spot the difference between now compared to last week when it was working, or spot the difference between user A and user B where one's okay and one isn't working. To get a lot of information out and quickly, without having to go to Explorer or those sorts of things. So it's not that we can only get the information out this way. It's just we can get the information out quicker this way once you get used to it. Here's one I like a lot. Again, the sort of thing I used to use Sysinternal's Process Explorer for in the old days. What will this do? Again, you don't even need to necessarily understand it, because this will be on either in tweets of mine or on Pastebin, or both. What this will do is go and find any module, so DLL loaded by any process, which has that particular DLL loaded, which, for those of you who know Citrix well, is what it puts in for its application hooks, so that it gets injected into pretty much every, certainly, user process. So I use this a lot. For instance, let's say you run in an installer and it says, no, can't update because this file's in use and it's DLL. Well, you can use this to go and find what DLL is in use. Yeah. Okay. Oh, and we can even, again, it's not just troubleshooting, this is fixing. So what I'm doing there is for every Chrome process, I'm going and setting its base priority to below normal. It's probably sat at normal, and that means anything at a higher priority than below normal will be given CPU preferentially over those processes. But if nothing else needs a CPU, then Chrome will be able to get it. So that's a sort of poor man's performance management. Get child item we use. I'm just going to go through this very quickly because I'm massively running out of time, as I always do, because I'm very enthusiastic about trying to get a lot of stuff in, but then go off on tangents and demonstrations and so on. Again, I'm using dir, which is the built-in alias for get child item. Trying to find large files, for instance. So I'm looking in this particular folder to find the 10 largest files. Or here I'm actually recursing down a whole tree to find the largest files and show when. I can indeed.
All right, sorry, we ran into time.
Oh, I still got 1 minute left on my timer. But hey, no problem at all. Who am I to argue? Okay, well, as I think people have said already, I'm around for questions in the round table. We'll make the slides available. Questions, comments, etc. Come to the round table, ping me on Twitter. Thank you very much for having me.
Yes, thank you, Guy. Very insightful. I got to see Guy on a master class not too long ago. It was very informative. I use a lot of those things from the websites that he's going to have shortcuts to. I very highly recommend to go out there and check it out and see for yourself. You might be able to use some of them. Like he said, use them. Make sure you know what they do before you try to use them out. Then if you have any questions for him, he's going to be at the round table, like you said. And then, so for now, we're going to do the sponsor session. So please choose the sponsor booth on the CUGC lobby to watch a live demo. And then after that, we'll have Wendy Gay and Craig Brumley to have their presentation. So thank you for joining. Have a great day.